Hello, and welcome to another episode of Out of the Fire podcast, where we have great conversations about fire and technology and all kinds of other things. And today I have two awesome folks from the fire community here. If you have not seen them before, you probably have not been involved in fire for very long. But guys, please introduce yourselves. I probably won't do as good of a job as you will.
Go ahead, Benji.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Benji Graham. I am a fire evangelist currently working with Belize. I have been involved with fire since March of 2020, involved in standing up patient access API. I also run an online community known as the Fire Department. You can find us on LinkedIn. Please do. And I will be in Pittsburgh next week for the Connect-a-Thon Working Group meeting. Great to meet everybody. Bill.
Yeah, I am also with Belize, much like Benji and I work together on a daily basis. I've been around the fire world since about 2019, when I started attending my first Connect-a-Thon. I've been to, I think, every Connect-a-Thon since, and more recently, many WGM. So I will also be in Pittsburgh and looking forward to that. My title here at Belize is Director of Innovation, and that's what also crossed my path with fire. I'm terribly excited about the prospect, the value proposition of fire, and I'm especially passionate about digital quality measurement, and so fire and CQL measures and all of that good stuff. I also like Benji, do a little extracurricular firing. If anyone is in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, DMV area, feel free to reach out. We host quarterly what we call fireside dinners, where it's just a bunch of people getting together that like this stuff. It's really low stress and a lot of fun. Yeah, so that's my story, Gene.
And you're sticking to it. Okay, so yeah, and to that end as well, I don't know if this podcast will actually be published in time for next weekend's HL7 Connect-a-thon in Pittsburgh, but I'm in Pittsburgh and we're actually hosting a Pittsburgh fireside dinner. So please reach out. I think we got already 15 people or so that are coming, and then we'll see how many more we'll got. But yeah, okay, great. Gents, thank you very much for hopping on. And as you know, this podcast has been kind of growing in the listenership, I guess, or the audience. And there's kind of all kinds of things we have talked about in the past. But really, it's pretty much like an open mic. So whatever you guys want to touch on is fine. But we do have a little bit of agenda, or a little bit of, I guess, a main topic that we can touch on, which is the quality measurement and digital quality on fire. They have a lot of, I guess, experience with that as well, having gone from kind of like your legacy or a very standard pathway of working on quality measures for a health plan and the provider network, not on fire and not using fire, just doing all kinds of development with SQL databases and things like that. Then I actually had an opportunity to join a healthcare startup called BeWell 3 years ago plus. I spent the majority of my time there actually writing and building CQL and running a team that built that quality analytics platform. Yeah, so let's start maybe by where we're at currently with CQL. Obviously, we have NCQA that has put out a DCS. I think that's been kind of like a big step forward in the industry, that somebody kind of took the lead on that and put that out there. A lot of organizations are trying to implement it. Where do you think we're at right now? And you guys have a unique perspective as well, because I think you guys are working with organizations and other folks as well. So what's the current state?
Yeah, I think we're at the very front edge of the digital quality measurement future. I think so. A few things. I think that one, I think finally the core CQL spec has been mature enough for a year or two at least to do real measurement. It's been able to do that for a while, but I think more recently there's been some efforts by folks like there's a digital quality implementers community that Levitt organized, where it's a bunch of folks that are doing measures engines and testing their measures engines, proprietary measures engines, against a bunch of unit tests. So I almost think there's 3,000 unit tests, if you will, and if you can pass these tests, then your engine proves itself to have faithfully implemented the spec. And it's really been a fascinating process to watch very smart people who've implemented these engines realize that they interpreted the English statements in the spec, both valid but differently. I think over the last year or two, it's been mostly tightening up those little teeny exceptions, but in quality measurement, I think that's the kind of stuff that tends to bite you. So it's really nice to see that the spec itself has gotten a lot more robust in a way that will prevent misinterpretations, and the implementations that are based on the CQL spec have gotten a lot more consistent. So I think we're at a place where the spec is mature. I think where we're immature is around the actual operational details and the specifics. I'm going to point to the Data Exchange for Quality Measurement Implementation Guide. Anyone that's been around the FHIR block knows that it's all about the implementation guides, and there are way too many of them, but you got to master the ones that are applicable to your niche. And in quality measurement, the one I think that really needs maturing is the Data Exchange for Quality Measurement. It is good. I mean, it is fairly comprehensive right now. I'm not really offering a specific critique. Rather, I think the industry needs to rally around it and figure out what use cases, usage exactly are folks going to align on. Because right now, to its credit, the DEQM offers some significant flexibility in how the data is exchanged for quality measurement. It can be anything from bulk to individual API calls to asynchronous versus synchronous versus individual measure submissions, multi-measure submission. I mean, it's really robust and therefore a little complicated. And I think I strongly suspect that most implementers and most partners will not adopt every possible data exchange mechanism. So it would be nice to see the industry really weigh in and provide some guidance. And I've been a little underwhelmed, to be honest with you, sitting at all these connectathons and working group meetings and in the standards discussions. Been a little underwhelmed at the engagement, specifically on that topic. In general, FHIR is a really exciting space. I invite anyone, if you've never been to a connectathon or working group, to dive in. It is some of the most welcoming community around. But specifically when it comes to DEQM, it'd be nice to see more healthcare providers and technology vendors at the table discussing their preferences. Okay, so that's a lot of commentary. I will shut up and turn it back to you, to Gene or Benji, to offer your perspective.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback onto what you said. I mean, Gene, your question was sort of like, what is the state of things when it comes to digital quality measurement? I think the state of things are that, yeah, we are on the bleeding edge, and there has been a lot more standardization and a lot of work going into standardization of things like CQL and the interpretation of CQL, right? But I think where we're at right now is it's really the data set. Speaking to Bill's thing about, kind of getting people to actually start submitting the data, using the data and exchanging it using FHIR, agreeing upon like that common data set. And we point to QI core a lot. And QI core is very comprehensive, but it's difficult to envision a world where anybody right now currently is going to be able to fully implement QI core. So maybe a subset of that, something like the US CDI plus quality, which is a sort of a smaller subset that's focused on existing measures. I think we're going to start moving towards that place, right, where we help out the people that need to exchange the data, not have to boil the ocean or eat the whole elephant, just, get that subset. What's been great the last few years has been organizations like NCQA really forcing a paradigm shift of saying, starting in, I think it's measure year 2027 or measure year 2026, but they're only going to accept HEDIS reporting in FHIR, which is big because that means that the payers and the providers have to start meeting that where the rubber meets the road. And CMS, right? We've seen very clear signals from them that hospital quality reporting and a lot of their quality payment programs are going to start leveraging FHIR in the near future. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting space to be, but it's about people like us that have to be able to help make that a reality and meet the implementers where they're at and just offer them that help and not just legislative sticks and carrots.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. For sure. I think that I agree with a lot of what both of you are stating in that we have to walk before we run, right? And it sounds like we're essentially building a new house. We're still living in the old house, and this is payers, providers. They're quality industry, even HEDIS, right? And CQA, we're not using digital quality for reporting yet. I know you mentioned 27, Benji, but I think it's more like 2030 at this point, from what I heard. Regardless of the timelines and the dates, I think, yeah, we do have to kind of watch as the house next door is being built, and we're up to like the level of where we've built the first floor. I'm not sure we've built the second floor yet, so we can't really move our family over yet. I think there's been a lot of progress, and you mentioned DQIC bill and all the efforts there to kind of standardize, the foundation, which is like the engine and the specs, right? If you don't even have the same implementation of being able to calculate, 2 plus 2 equals 4, and one engine gives you 4.5, and the other one gives you 5, and the other one gives you 39. But you obviously can't proceed to adopting it and having a multi-stakeholder ecosystem. I think that's very important. But I also think that the impetus is there from what you mentioned, also CMS now, and everybody understands that we have to move the needle on that. And so maybe next question I would have is, what is your recommendation for people that are trying to get into the Europair? You have your legacy infrastructure there, and I think I actually wrote a Substack article on this, so check it out if you haven't followed my Substack FHIR IQ playbook. But what would you recommend to those pairs right now? They're just getting started. They have the kind of legacy infrastructure. They spent millions of dollars on it. They don't know anything about FHIR or CQL, but they know they have to get into this. What's the best way to do it from your perspective?
I'll start if you don't mind, Bill. So, I mean, I have a little bit of experience with this because this was my first interaction with FHIR. It was a large payer that really didn't have much interaction with it before, and now they were trying to meet, these new sort of legislative mandates. And it's a process, and what I would recommend is making the decision to spend the time now in putting those processes in place and bringing in people that have the right amount of domain expertise so that they can help you accurately map your data, right? The big decision is always, do we want to create a new FHIR native ecosystem, or do we want to leave our data in the formats that we're currently using, but place a FHIR facade on top of it? And the unfortunate thing is there's no magic bullet to that, right? That's going to differ depending on the use case and depending on what the underlying data looks like. But standing up a FHIR facade is not difficult anymore, right? I mean, we used to think that it was this big difficult thing now that we had to do, but right now there's so many out of the box solutions that can start working from day one. And then it just becomes more of a process of mapping the data, right? Getting the data out of your legacy formats and your legacy data stores and just plugging it into those discrete places within those FHIR resources to make sure that you're meeting at the very least like those implementation guides that are being called out and recommended. But that's my first recommendation would just be to invest in that, in a team and an infrastructure that has the right amount of domain expertise that can quickly sort of stand that up, and then future-proof that process and follow your data lineage and make sure that your data quality is good. Because that ultimately is what it comes down to. If the data is not at sufficient quality, it doesn't matter if you have data plugged in the right places in the FHIR resource. If it's the quality's not there, it's not going to be usable for anything, right?
And if it's especially something new that your organization has not worked with before, like I think there's a lot of organizations that have very familiar with claims data, right? Claims data has been kind of the backbone of quality measurement for the last 25 years. And we're transitioning to this new world of using actual clinical EMR data. It's a new world, right? And it's like, I've talked to people and they don't know where to start. They're like, well, I understand how a claim works, but I don't understand how to work with a condition or observation resource or encounter. You're telling me this is the actual data that's coming out of the clinical system. You're like, yeah, but this is going to get you data that may get you data like 24 hours after the patient actually visits the provider, right? As opposed to waiting 30, 60, 90 day for a claim to adjudicate. So like, would you agree, Benji, that's like a big challenge is getting people onto the actually using all of this data in FHIR?
And it's a mindset shift from that transactional mindset, right? Something happened and I'm being sent a claim, and that claim is this self-contained thing that has all of the information needed to process that claim and pay that claim and make determinations, right? But we have to transition away from that mindset. Instead of looking at this claim as one sort of enclosed thing, of now we have an encounter that becomes the center of something, and that encounter involves a patient and a practitioner and one or more conditions and one or more procedures, and now we got to follow up after the encounter, and the encounter may lead to another encounter. You know what I'm saying? It's like now it becomes this different kind of paradigm and this different mindset where instead of dealing with one monolithic piece of data that we do a thing with and then not have to worry about again, it's a bigger picture thing. It's a buildup of a picture about a patient and a patient's sort of medical history and their medical care and their care team. It just requires that shift in mentality. And again, I think it behooves particularly payers to have, that I keep going back to domain expertise, but that clinical sort of expertise and that clinical perspective away from the transactional. And that's really what's going to unlock a lot of the potential of what we're doing with not only FHIR, but quality measurement and thinking about clinical quality, right? And improving patient health overall is really going to require that. Bill, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on, and just to amplify some of what you're saying, I think for some of the folks that might be considering how to proceed, especially if you're amongst the leadership at a provider or a payer, and not necessarily technically, if you're not writing software all day, the FHIR spec can be a little intimidating, because I think one of the fundamental strengths is also sort of a fundamental barrier of FHIR for new folks. And what I mean by that is, I really think the strengths that FHIR brings, that very few, if any, health IT standards have had in the past, it is both a data model and a transmission mechanism, right? It's both a way to structure the data and a way to send it. And that hasn't really existed. Where I'm going, the reason I mention that is that, just to amplify Benji's point, I think if you're new to the space, like, one of the first things I'd recommend is getting at least initially familiar with that data model part. Right? All of these nouns that, Gene, you were throwing around, Benji, you were throwing around, right? Practitioners, notice they didn't say doctors, right? And observations, notice they didn't say labs. Like, all of those things, like, there's a certain vocabulary, and it's probably not more than, a day or two's worth of effort of really just sort of digging in and reading through, because they're all fair. The domain model of FHIR is the domain model of healthcare. It just has a vocabulary. And I think once you know those nouns and adjectives, then you can start speaking the language of FHIR, and then you can start talking about quality measurement, which is step 2 or 3. But yeah, I guess that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting how the industry is able to make that transition, because I don't think we've had a transition like this before. This is first time that we're going through this. I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe from manual to like around when the internet came about, and then you've had this explosion of these new tools, like you had Oracle and SQL Server and Teradata and all those other things came out, and people were able to actually gather the data where it wasn't like manual abstraction. So I guess it's maybe has happened like a long time ago, right? And probably people they're doing it now are not the same people that led those transitions. Um, but yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, because I guess like just by getting into it, it's easy to get into and hard to expert level at it. But it's very easy to get started, and really you're never gonna get going if you don't start somewhere. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I'm hearing that you guys can say, right? Like it's like waiting on the sidelines is not going to do it. And having myself made the transition of, like, I was at a payer, I was one of those developers, and managing a team of developers and analysts, and we never had to work with FHIR. It was just not part of our job description. There was some team and organization that were doing all kinds of great work. Most people, I think in quality specifically, have never had to like get hands-on on it. And
Yeah.
so I would highly recommend just get started, look at the spec, and understand that it is going to like connect. The dots are going to connect, especially if you've been in healthcare before and all this data is familiar to you. You know how claims data works, how quality measures work. If you look at FHIR, it will make sense. We promise, right, Bill or Benji? Mostly.
Mostly.
Unless you try to make sense of US core, that's a different story.
Yeah. I would encourage, like, if it is your first time and if you are just starting out, start in the use cases that you're most familiar with, right? Because that's where FHIR will start to make more sense. Because if you start just trying to explore FHIR in all its vastness, you're going to get quickly overwhelmed. Start within those use cases, stay in your lane, as they like to say, right, in the parlance of our times. But yeah, and then you may maybe seek to expand beyond that.
So remember, it's not just a schema. I have to correct people all the time. Oh, it's just a schema. Just send me the layout. Like, no, it's actually a whole language that you do have to learn. There's semantic interoperability, as they like to call it, which means that it's a structure, but it's also structure within a structure and within a structure. And it's like made out of these Legos. And you do have to understand that. And but most people should be familiar with terminology already, right? So like if you're doing claims or you're doing quality or you're doing, revenue cycle operations or anything, you should be already pretty familiar with most of the terminology, right? Okay. So all right. What do you think in terms of digital quality is like the holy grail moment at like, yes, this is working and this is like as intended? Is that going to be when we finally like get people like on your rates or whatnot, and then you're like, oh wait, our rates are actually better because now we have access to more data than we've ever had? Or is it just, hey, we're able to pull data from more places? It's not just one claim gets submitted from one. It's now you get access to labs, pharmacies, even patient data, right? Maybe submit your own patient data. If you're a patient, close your own gap in care or something like that. What do you guys think?
I see two significant waypoints in the journey that I can't wait for. One is, I think as a midway point in this journey to DQM, digital quality measurement, it will be the point at which the administrative costs and burdens of participating in a quality measurement program are less than they are today, and hopefully orders of magnitude less than the benefit you gain. So I don't think we've hit that tipping point quite yet, but as Benji and we might have mentioned, both Benji and I work closely with CMS a lot in our day jobs. So we're most familiar and closest to their quality measurement programs. And it's one commonly held belief is that it's going to take literally an act of Congress, right, to move this ball forward. People know, the health IT in the US didn't really adopt FHIR until the federal government said US core is the law of the land and FHIR APIs are required. And then it moved. However, I think, and I think that there's this waypoint coming, this point along our journey that's not too far away, where an act of Congress is not needed because the standards investments will have been made. I mean, to the extent they've already made to support US core, there's more to be done. But there's a point here where the snowball gets big enough that it's self-sustaining, and it actually you will embrace digital quality measurement with FHIR because it's the cheaper, easier way, not because the government said I had to or NCQA said I had to. So that's waypoint one. But the holy grail at the end is one of the unsung features of the FHIR standard around quality measurement that I find just terribly exciting is the fact that you can define what quality healthcare is in the shape of a measure. And so, you can have a measure that has all of the logic in CQL, so it's machine readable, it's human readable, and it describes one aspect of quality care. For instance, all, I think, men over the age of 4 to 5 are supposed to have colon cancer screening once a decade or something like that, right? I mean, like, I'm not a clinician at heart, but I know that is one set of clinical practice guidelines, and that it's embodied in this measure about colon cancer screening. One of the subtle features that's embedded within FHIR and the FHIR measure resource that doesn't get a lot of press is that same measure that would allow NCQA, CMS, or other organization to measure the quality of care of a population, that same measure definition on that same server with absolutely no extra effort can also, in real time, evaluate the care gaps that might be present for a specific person. So if I walk into my doctor, that same FHIR server can say, hey, by the way, and it can receive a CDS hooks call, all these standard, very complementary standards, but the same measure resource can guide and produce guidance to the doctor when I'm in front of the doctor saying, hey, it's been 14 years since Bell's colon cancer screening. You might want to say something. And I think that almost real-time feedback is the holy grail. And it means that if that was omnipresent, then all of a sudden these quality measures that come out and are done on an annual basis, quarterly basis by CMS, NCQA, everybody would just always be passing with flying colors, or know they were not going to, right? I mean, like, or they know they've made decisions not to get there, but it won't be a surprise the way it clicked.
Even aware, yeah, you're even
Yeah,
aware that you even have a gap in
yeah,
care, right? Like
yes,
that's,
yeah,
I tell this story, like I've worked at my old job before and where my team used to create all of these analytics in this huge care gap list that they call, and these are, you know, prevalent in the industry. They pull these care gap lists, and at the end of the year, when it's kind of crunch time for submission of the rates, like you have to get them in before the end of the year, or you're not going to be able to take credit and get credit from NCQA and other CMS. And so there's these gap lists that get pulled, get sent to care managers and providers. The patient never, ever even sees any of that. All they do is just check your chart that, hey, you did have the colorectal cancer screening or you didn't, right? And then it's like, well, nobody did actually anybody reach out to the patient to have them schedule that or like let them know, hey, by the way, you're due for it. They're relying on the provider, right? And the provider is not even, you know, they have 15 minutes to discuss. They may not even get to that point, right? They may see the patient once a year if they're lucky. So I think, yeah, we're changing the paradigm completely on that. And funny enough that you bring this up because, you know, in the upcoming Connectathon, I don't know if you guys saw this post from Josh Mundell about the language first interoperability.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually trying to work on a quality measure use case for breast cancer screening using an agent framework. So
yeah, that's
hopefully
awesome.
this is like a big leap into probably, Gene, you're way in over your head here. But I'm telling you, the capabilities of Claude Code and Vercel and all these other tools now are so crazy that like one person can like do stuff that's like, wow, it's actually like working to some extent. So like that, but it's funny that you bring this up because that's like also a huge use case for it because can have an agent basically reach out from provider to another agent and then they can evaluate, you know,
Yeah.
was the breast cancer screening completed? If not, here's your options. And then it's like a real time thing. It's not on something you have to wait for all these organizations to like share data. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there are some folks that really see AI and the LLM's capabilities around interpreting unstructured data as almost a death knell for data standards like FHIR. However, I see it from a slightly different perspective, and this sort of aligns with the use case I think that you were citing, Gene, which is, you know, if we can leverage AI to infer clinical best practices and codify them explicitly and transparently in things like FHIR measure resources, which can then be passed around as immutable descriptions of what good quality care is, then the whole black box problem of the LLM at point of care is, I think, at least mitigated. And especially in the short term, where I don't think we're at the point yet where anybody wants to trust an LLM for real-time life or death guidance. But, you know, if it's outside of that to help develop better measures that are informed by the vast amounts of health data we have today, then I think that can be in a really interesting of sort of a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that part of the reason why people should jump into a FHIR? And now actually FHIR makes AI easier. FHIR makes it like almost like you know what you're talking about. And now like when you connect an LLM and then everybody's jumping in head feet first, right? I think, Bill, I would agree with you, but I think that maybe there are some, I think providers already using that, right, for advice. Hopefully not life and death. Like that's, I agree. Like I don't know that I would be comfortable with that. But I do know that there is a lot of information that, you know, you can get. Anyway, so what do you think, Benji? Is like FHIR is good for
I think FHIR and
AI.
AI could have a really good relationship. FHIR is great because it's so composable, right? And when we talk about the move away from standards like the CCDA and standards like some of the X12 standards, right, where it's sort of monolithic giant pieces of data where you may or may not need most or all of it, right? Down to now, we can pass around granular pieces of data, and they're even looking into, you know, with some of the bulk standard updates, even more granular, like just tiny snippets of resources being passed around. I think AI can lend itself really well to that because that sort of graph-like structure of FHIR where we have, you know, nodes of FHIR resources that share relationships with other FHIR resources. AI is going to have a great time traversing all of that and making big picture sense of it. And especially when we think about agentic AI and agent-to-agent communication, I don't see it as a death knell for something like FHIR or any other data standard. I see it as like an augmentation, right? This is now the next phase because yeah, we've got all this data and it's in this sort of discrete format that's really easy to pass around and that we can do lots of great things with. But now you add an AI agent to analyze these large sets of data, and I think it just makes things that much better. So I don't see it as a death knell. I do see that there's massive opportunity, and there's a potential for a great synergistic relationship between emerging AI and LLMs, like you said, and the FHIR standard itself. And the future probably starts to look like that. And I don't know if FHIR R6 is starting to incorporate or be forward thinking about, what AI may need or what we may need to do with the FHIR standard to make it, better, easier, faster for AI to be able to leverage. But I would assume that they're doing that. And we know that HL7, they have, is it CHAI, which the acronym fails me right now, but it's a collaboration for health AI, something like that. I can't remember. But we know that they're heavily involved, right? And they have been since the beginning. I think when a lot of people were really skeptical about whether AI was going to stick in healthcare, because you hinted at it, Gene, about patients especially are still very skeptical. We heard at the quality conference in Baltimore earlier this year that it's about 50-50 when they've polled patients about whether or not they're comfortable with an AI even just being involved in their care, with a doctor even just using it as a co-pilot. I think that'll start to change as the AIs become better and more capable, and as we start to define what is the ethical use, right? And what are those parameters that providers and like you said, making life or death decisions, that's going to be a hard sell for a long time, right? Of people saying, yeah, I'm happy with the AI evaluating all my charts and telling me how valuable my life is, right? We're a ways from that. But certainly for helping doctors, giving them more time with their patients and less time doing administrative work or less time poring over charts, etc. I think that, there's massive potential there. But I think FHIR helps that. I don't think FHIR is replaced by that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and while we're on this topic, what do you guys think about the big Epic announcement of the AI stuff? That's, I guess they're gonna be, what do they have? Three different AIs, and they gave them funny names like Annie, and I don't remember what the other ones
Yeah.
are, but there's
Yeah,
Annie.
another like one for each each
Yeah, one for the provider.
yeah,
One, yeah,
interested party, yeah. I mean, it seems so to zoom out and just the landscape of health IT providers, it seems like the obvious play for Oracle. Having bought Cerner, what does Oracle do that Epic hasn't had a history of? Which is Oracle is definitely one of the leaders in the corporate AI space, and has invested mind-numbing amounts of money to move that ball forward. And I know I know that Epic has as well, but I don't know that it's to the same degree. So I can't say I'm surprised. I thought it was a bit
yeah, and I think that they're partnering with Microsoft, right? So it's kind of like you got the same Microsoft versus Oracle thing going
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
What's top of mind, Bill, Benji, on your guys' minds right now?
For me, top of mind recently for me has been just sort of the concept of networks, right? And like an interoperable. I know they're talking about a provider directory, like a national provider directory, but just an interoperable FHIR endpoint directory, right? Where we make discovery of FHIR endpoints really easy and kind of trivial. But also this sort of the idea of networked exchange. So like Tefka is something that's always top of my mind. But now this recent announcement about the CMS aligned network, different, separate from Tefka, right? But seems to be a lot of kind of crossover there. I'm just really interested to see where we end up going. I think Tefka has the potential to be really super powerful and accelerate interoperability in the US. The participant finder, did you guys see this? It's like an interactive map where you can search for provider, payer, vendor, whatever, and it'll tell you if they're a participant and where they're located and which QN they're connected to, etc. Even something like that is great, right? But how do we make it to where it's easier for people to onboard to Tefka, and how do we make it to where people can easily expect what kind of response they're going to get out of just putting a query out into the ether? I think as we move forward, that stays top of mind with me, because that's really going to help make data interoperable. And when we think of things like quality measurement or whatever, right, being able to exchange that data over a trusted network where everybody knows, we're using basically the same security protocols. We're using basically the same exchange mechanisms. I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, and maybe like implementation of the IAS
Yeah.
use case, because I think, yeah, we've seen it working. The technology
Hmm.
works. I mean, we've seen it now.
Yeah, it
Several
works.
folks. I mean, I've seen several folks actually demonstrate. I don't know if there's any actual production use cases for it yet, but like in terms of like, it's also like a huge cost saver, right? Like if you can get access to all of your data from
Hmm.
every time you went to a provider. You can go to your next time you go to a provider, you bring that data with you, whatever, and they don't need to order that third set of tests on you, right? Like that fourth set of whatever, x-rays, right? And it's like, that's what really is killing us as a health system in this country is this crazy overutilization
Yeah.
because nobody has access to the data, right?
Yeah, we've got. It's funny. I offer an internal FHIR course, and one of the stats I cited. I'm not going to get this right off the top of my head, but there was a study done at Boston Children's that just showed that the predominance of tests were duplicative or unnecessary. That in reading a little bit of between the lines, this is probably some personal perspective injected into the study itself. But what I took away from it was that it was sort of demonstrable proof that here in the US, at least, we've gotten better. It is easier and cheaper to do another test than it is to figure out how to share the data from the test that was just done this morning.
Hmm.
But that's the way it is. So, I mean, what's the quickest way to the data? I'll just do another test. And you know that
I've had,
it's a damn
yeah,
shame. It's a damn shame because at best you're talking a blood draw, which is unpleasant. At worst, I mean, you're talking about some really nasty tests that you don't want.
I've had to get my wife's records because she has a condition. She has lupus, and she goes and she sees actually Allegheny Health Network and Highmark. They have a really good. They have like a national expert in lupus here, but she had to go to other offices and see other network and our insurance changes, whatever. I've had to request the stupid faxes, wait for a CD to be sent over. 2 weeks until they were able to do that. And send in this day and age of TEFCA, FHIR, they're probably HIEs that everybody's connected, but nobody gives a damn, right? It's like the patient, here's your CD because that's the easiest thing for me to do. So yeah, on that awesome, uh, awesome case, an example of why we need FHIR. It's been awesome just following you guys. I really appreciate you guys being on here. I followed also like I think the fire department. There's a Slack, there's a LinkedIn page, and there's the fireside dinner. And then you guys are pretty much in all of the HL7 events pretty much too, right? Like Benji, you're also. Do you want to plug your? I think you're given course, HL7 course as well?
Yeah. So coming this fall, look for my educational course. It's called FHIR for Business Analysts. It should be available first week of November. You'll be able to sign up before then. I encourage you to do that. If you are someone that's not on the technical side and you want to understand more about FHIR and how to bring that value to your organization and how to leverage it as a business analyst, a product owner, a delivery specialist, help you out there. Thank you.
My God, that's so
You're here.
needed. Like, that's awesome. So, Bill, thank you very much, Benji, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in Pittsburgh this weekend.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank you
again,
very
Gene.
much.
All right.